Are you looking to build an amazing Yu-Gi-Oh deck on a budget? Well, before you spend your hard-earned money, make sure to stick around and watch this video because these are the 5 best budget decks for the May 2023 competitive Yu-Gi-Oh format. Let's jump into it. What's up, Ocean? You got Matt here, and welcome to another amazing Yu-Gi-Oh video. Today we are talking about budget decks and why they are so good in today's format. Not everyone can afford a $1,000 full power Kashtira deck, and to be honest, most people shouldn't be spending that kind of money on that. Pay your rent, come on. But either way, we are talking about decks that are going to be $75 to $100 in total price range, and that have room to grow, to be honest. And these decks are already really good in today's format because they're able to handle and beat some of the best strategies in today's meta. Right now, the meta is being made up out of 6 decks, in my opinion. The 6 of the best decks there are going to be Kashtira, Branded, Mathmech, Sprite, Super Heavy Samurai, and Purely, with Sprite kind of being on the outside looking into that top 5 in my mind. Now, these decks are all really strong. So what does a deck have to be able to do to be able to beat these strategies? Well, in my opinion, you have to have enough non-engine space to be able to deal with these decks by running board breakers or really powerful hand traps that are kind of like turn enders. Cards like Droll and Lockbird, or Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, or even cards like Dimension Shifter are insanely good against a lot of different strategies. Not all of them, but some of them. While cards like board breakers, like the different Kaijus and Santa Claus and Lava Golem, Evenly Matched and Dark Ruler No More, are really good in certain situations as well. And these decks can play basically every single one of those. That being said, it's up to you to determine which of these non-engine cards are best for your particular strategy. And like I said, we're looking at $75 to $100 to build all of these decks. If you guys are excited for the video, then do me a favor and smash the like button, because at 40 likes on the video, I will be bringing you a nice deck profile for one of these decks. So make sure to stick around for that. And of course, guys, thank you so much for 400 subscribers. Let's go ahead and try and reach our end of year goal of 1,000. Let's see if we can do it. Now, without further ado, here are the top 5 best budget decks for the May 2023 competitive Yu-Gi-Oh format. Let's jump into it. Starting off the list at number 5 is Dark World. Dark World just got a brand new structure deck in the past couple of months, making it one of the best new budget strategies in the game. The fact that you get basically everything right out of the box is absolutely insane, minus a couple of key extra deck cards like Saryuja Skulldread and a card like Muckraker of the Underworld. That being said, this deck can be easily upgraded to reach its peak potential, and by the time you get to that point, you're going to be such a good Dark World player, which is one of the major issues with the strategy. That being said though, it is a fantastic deck at breaking through boards, but also at setting up an amazing turn 1 combo. The problem is, it's a very non-linear combo that depends a lot on the cards you draw off of your strategy and the cards you're sending to the graveyard off of cards like the Dangers. It really depends a lot on that variance, which could be a problem or could be an advantage, whichever way you look at it. I also feel this deck has multiple different playstyles, whether you want to go with a build your board multi-negate combo with like Appaloosa and the Graph of Fusion and other cards as well, or if you want to go with the hand loop strategy with cards like Sarah Lee and cards like Silva. It is really strong, and your opponent doesn't really know what they're going to have to deal with. That being said though, there are quite a few hand traps that are problematic for the strategy, and to my opinion, the biggest one, and obviously this is correct, 100% factual, the biggest hand trap against this strategy is going to be Droll and Lockbird. You do a lot of adding from your deck to your hand, a lot of drawing, and Droll kind of just shuts that down. I also feel like Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, especially on your Gates of Dark World, the field spell, is absolutely detrimental to this strategy, and those 2 hand traps are seeing a lot of play in the current format to deal with decks like Super Heavy Samurai, which are, let's just say it how it is, it's just a better deck. So you have to be able to be a really good player, you have to be able to play around the variance, and at the same time, the deck can be kind of bricky. Now, all this to say, the deck is still really good, and a strong pilot for Dark World can be absolutely crazy strong in any format, whether it's going to be your locals or a high-level format like a YCS. At number 4, we have Exosister. This deck has fallen from grace. It really has. The fact that it was so decent, I'd say, in tier limits format, the tier 0 tier format, was crazy because that deck interacted a lot with the graveyard. Now we don't have that as much. Not as much interaction in the graveyard in these formats, but there still is some. That being said though, it's a crazy strong rank 4 strategy that relies a lot on its main deck engine that is pretty small. You can play between 12 and 15 cards for non-engine spaces, which is about average to above average in the current format. On top of that is one of the best decks to play Dimension Shifter, which is crazy against quite a few different strategies. So having access to that in your main deck is really good, unless it's of course against something like Kashtira, which they don't really care. So just keep that in mind and make sure to side it out going second, or in the second and third games, I should say. Also, this deck is so inexpensive. There are only 3 or 4 cards that are actually more than $3 or $4, and none of them are more than $7. So it's a really cheap strategy that can be easily improved, and as you get better with the deck, the ceiling will just keep on rising. Having a ton of main deck space is obviously an advantage, and the new support from Cyberstorm Access with like Sakitama, with the old card in Aratama, I think it was, is really good to help you get to your rank 4s very quickly without using your Exosister Martha. Now for some cons for this strategy, in my mind the biggest issue is going to be that right now a lot of the decks aren't using their graveyard as much, and this deck is at its best when we're in a very heavy graveyard reliant format. The problem is Kashtira and Purely really don't care too much about the graveyard. Other decks do, absolutely, but these two, they really don't. There are some really strong contenders in the current format, so we have to keep that in mind. Also, in my opinion, this deck has a lower ceiling than a lot of the other decks in the format right now. I feel like it has a really good floor, but the ceiling is kind of peaked by just your skill level, which takes a lot of play testing and practice to master. On top of that, we're in a very heavy negate reliant format, and the fact that this deck doesn't really put up any negates is kind of problematic. It gets banishes and destructions and stuff like that, but no real negates, which obviously can be problematic when you're going up against a Kashtira player or a player that's playing Super Heavy Samurai, and you need to stop that Wakaushi from resolving. At number 3, we have a deck that was on the previous budget tier list in Traptrix. This deck is so strong still, even though it's lost a bit of love in the format right now because of the introduction of Super Heavy Samurai and Purely and the real rise in Eteria Runic. This deck is still really powerful. Having access to a way to just have basically a constructed deck out of 3 structure decks is crazy. $30, 3 structure decks, you're basically set. The cards you have to add to this are going to be like your Zeus, your Parallel Exceeds, and your Time Thief Redoers. In total, that's like $15, $20 at the maximum, I'd say, which is really strong. You have ways to improve the deck with cards like Solemn Judgment and Infinite Impermanence, but they're not mandatory to play, and they're still well within your budget. I will say that it is a pretty linear game plan, which depending on how you look at it could be a pro or a con. To me, it's both. You want to get Sarah out on the field so that you can take advantage of the advantage that it gives you, which is obviously how you win games. It is very flexible, however, because you can rely on many different trap cards to deal with different situations. Cards like Gravedigger's Trap Hole are good, cards like Floodgate Trap Hole to shut down Kashtira are fantastic, and of course cards like Traptrix Trap Hole Nightmare have their uses as well. On top of that, it's a really good control style deck which has advantages in the format right now and focuses on getting more advantage than your opponent through the use of multiple effects from your Traptrix Sarah. I also really like that you can play around basically any hand trap with this strategy outside of a few weird hands and a few weird exceptions. And on top of this, what might be the biggest advantage out of all, there is so much content revolving around the Traptrix deck right now because everyone wanted to make their own Traptrix deck profile, including me, and a combo guide as well, which will be linked up over there, so make sure to go and check that out. And because of that, you have ways that you can learn the deck from watching others play, and then you can go and master it on your own time as well. Now for some cons for this strategy. It has a linear game plan. I mentioned that in the pros, but like I said, it can be a pro or a con depending on how you look at it. Everyone knows your goal is to get to Traptrix Sarah, and if they decide to just stop that, well, what are you going to do? If they Kaiju your Sarah, what do you do? If they Ghost Ogre your normal summon of Traptrix Mantis while you're getting another Traptrix monster, unless you have Traptrix Holutea set and another trap card in hand, what are you going to do? It becomes really difficult to deal with that. On top of it, every single person is siding for back row decks. Everyone has the Evenly Matches or the Cosmic Cyclones and Twin Twisters or the Harpy's Feather Dust or whatever the case might be. So you have to be able to have a way to deal with those strategies, and luckily Traptrix has a little bit of a way to do it, just not as consistency as we'd like to see. On top of that though, the deck kind of loses if you don't get Sarah established, and that's obviously a problem. Without Sarah, you're just not winning anything with Traptrix. At number 2 is Swordsoul. Swordsoul is a deck that I should have mentioned last time around, but I didn't, and I kind of feel bad because now the most expensive card in the deck has kind of like, well, risen in price, and that's obviously a problem for a budget tier list. But Swordsoul is a great deck because it has a very small engine that's able to just do a lot of different things. Cards like Swordsoul Moye, Taya, Longwan are all really good. Swordsoul Emergence are all offering consistency pieces for the deck, which is very strong, and it gets you into a lot of the same boards very easily through quite a few different hand traps. And on top of that, it can play many different hand traps. It has like 15 to 20 different spaces in your main deck for board breakers and hand traps, which is insane to think about. It also puts up a really nice negate, multi-negate board with cards like Baronne de Fleur and the Chenging, which are, well, Monster Negate and an Omni Negate, which is again really solid, and having Blackout as support as well is very strong. I will say that I like the fact that it is a deck that you can invest in for the long term. If you want to just pick up the bare bones of the deck and not pick up a Baronne de Fleur, which in my opinion, the biggest con for this strategy is the fact that Baronne is now a $50 card, even though it has multiple printings. It's just, you have to make sure you have that card. If you don't, getting just the bare bones deck is really nice still, and you can work towards getting the Baronne over time, which is obviously going to make the deck much better. I also feel like another advantage is the fact that this deck probably won't get hit on a ban list anytime soon. Maybe it gets something limited to 2 or to 1 just for consistency, but the deck is not overpowered by any means. The fact that it's not going to be hit means to me it'll stay as a tier 2 deck for quite a long time. Now for the cons. I mentioned that this deck is really budget, but Baron de Fleur is like a $50, $55, $60 card, which obviously is eating up majority of your budget here. The good news is you can work up to it. I will also say that the fact that there are better combo-oriented decks in the format like Super Heavy Samurai is obviously not ideal. But again, this deck is fantastic, it offers so much, and I really don't have too many negative things to say about it. So if you want to pick up a budget deck, I would definitely recommend Swordsoul as one of the very few options on the short list of decks to pick up. So before we jump into the number 1 deck, I want to remind you guys to hit that subscribe button because only 3% of people who watch my videos are subscribed to the channel. 3%. That's crazy. I see all these numbers, 20, 25, 30%. 3. If you guys are enjoying the video, do me a favor, smash the subscribe button, and of course, leave a like if you want to see deck profiles, combo guides for these decks I'm presenting you today. Let's go ahead and start talking about the number 1 deck being Mathmech. Yeah, Mathmech is a tier 1 deck, one of the 3 to 5 best decks in the format right now, and it's a budget deck. The most expensive card in the strategy is going to be Access Code Talker, and to be honest, you don't really need to have 2 copies of it. It's nice to have 2 because of Kashtira, but having 1 at a $40 price range, a $35 price range is more than enough. And then you have all your good cards. Mathmech Circular, Super Factorial is a fantastic card as well. It's a little bit pricey, about like $8, $9, but still a very good card nonetheless. Everything else is about $1 maximum. And then you just have a ton of hand traps. You can play 15 hand traps. You can play consistency pieces out the ass. Signet mining, having access to Small World is great. Mathmech Circular is obviously ideal, and there's so many more options as well with the new Firewall Defensor cards. So it's a really strong deck that's consistent, puts up multiple options for interruptions, and at the same time can OTK out of nowhere. It goes from control with like Heat Soul all the way to OTK with Access Code Talker in a flash. It is that terrifying, and definitely one of the biggest contenders in the May 2023 format. I cannot speak highly enough about how much I recommend picking up Mathmech as the best budget deck for the May 2023 competitive format. And that is it, the top 5 best budget decks for the May 2023 format. If you guys enjoyed this video, then do me a massive favor and smash the like button on the video. Like I said, we're aiming for 40 likes on the video. Also, make sure to comment down below what is your favorite budget deck for the competitive Yu-Gi-Oh format in May 2023, as well as what decks are you playing right now, and let's see if budget decks can maybe beat the non-budget decks. At the same time, guys, subscribe to the channel as well. I would love to have you guys join our community, The Ocean. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you all next time.